Okay, we're recording, and I will call us to order. This is the Affordable Housing Committee of Old Lyme special meeting, November 2nd, 2020. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the Town of Old Lyme YouTube channel. Okay, thanks everybody for joining the second meeting, or the first of two meetings in November, to pick up where we left off on October 19th. So the only thing on the agenda is to continue those two deferred items from our regular meeting on October 19th, which is a rough draft outline of our committee report and to discuss any gaps in the information we need to complete that report. So you should have a version of the draft outline that is dated October 30th, which is the second version that was sent out, for which I apologize. But of course, as soon as I sent it, I saw one more thing I wanted to do, and sent you another version. I hope that didn't disrupt you too much. So for tonight, I'm going to try and wrap us in an hour if possible, so everybody can get to their dinner, and with the objective of at least taking a pass through the outline and then again coming up with those any glaring gaps in the information we need to keep moving. So with that in mind, I would propose that we focus first on the executive summary, which is meant to lay out sort of the logic line and the storyline of the report, and at a high level. And if we can start to get that into shape, then that'll give us a framework for the rest of the report. I would propose, having done that we go on and look at the draft recommendations, which is essentially a laundry list at this point of the things that have been surfaced in our prior meetings, along with some of the practices that have been picked up from what other towns have done. And you'll see a lot of stuff in brackets in there, which is basically placeholders. So if we get those two pieces, at least if we go through them tonight, collect our comments, and then we can take another run at this draft, and then aim to come together at our next meeting, which will be on November 16th, and really do a workshop to put together the middle of the report, which would be the findings that would support the recommendations, and that would be reflected in the summary. So if that all makes sense, I'll also upfront ask, I'm going to try and grab notes as we do this, but I'm confident that I will miss some. And even though the recording is there, I would appreciate that as we go through this, if anyone has any substantive changes they'd like to see made, or additions, that you send them to me, and I will, as well as discussing them, and I'll have it in writing, and I can bake those into the next draft of this. Okay. Anything before we start? I won't take the roll, but I'll just open it up.
Yeah, Michael, I'd like to make first a comment and then one very brief suggestion. The comment is, you've done a prodigious amount of work. It's very, very impressive, and the executive summary is very, very complete, I thought. And I have one possible recommendation. I see Harold kind of stepped away, but it's a question kind of directed at him, but you all may have thoughts about it. And that is that it seems to me that the overarching plan for the town's use of land and how it's going to develop in the next decade is the plan of conservation and development, which of course Harold is in charge of preparing. And it seems to me that the timing of that, when it's due, I don't know, in December, is it?
Well, actually, because of the COVID virus, that's been pushed back. So there's an
Back 90
executive order
days
that
or
covers it.
something.
Yeah.
Okay. But in any event, it does seem to me that one of the short-term recommendations is ought to include that the plan of conservation and development, and I want to be careful here, should acknowledge uh, and I think possibly comply with any recommendations of this committee that are in fact adopted by the selectmen, that are approved by the selectmen. That is not accept this report as we put it, as it's delivered, but those things that are in fact accepted from the report, recommendations that are accepted, should somehow find their way into the POCD.
Well, first of all, the POCD is a high-level document, right? We don't get into a lot of specifics. If we have something that could be available as an attachment, well, there's a thing I sent to Michael about the housing and housing options. But I guess the thing of it is, this document has to be done about the same time as our document to the selectmen has to be completed. All right, so I'm not sure how we can combine the both if they haven't been approved and received by anybody. That's number one. Number two, I guess it's like I said, this is the high level document. We're looking at big picture stuff. I mean, part of what we're trying to do is immediate things or more immediate things. And then we're trying to look projecting out to the future. And right now with the economy and everything else, I'm not sure. My crystal ball isn't very clear, and the commission's crystal ball isn't very clear. And so we're kind of trying to find out how all this impacts our current economics and our current future potential for growth. I don't know if that's clear or not.
Thanks, Harold. Yeah, I would agree with what you said in that based on my reading of the previous plan of conservation development, I would see that almost as an umbrella document that would look at some of the higher level directions and strategies and wouldn't necessarily match. And Peter, this is for you too. I wouldn't necessarily see the specific recommendations cloned between the two, but that there would be a consistency, and that with the plan of conservation and development being a higher level overarching document, that our recommendations as they were accepted and eventually the 830J plan would plug into to flesh out in more detail in a more time-bound fashion. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so.
Peter, does that help with where you were headed? Oh, yeah, we still have Peter. Peter, I see you're still with us and not muted, but if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay, let's press on. And if I recall last time, Peter had to drop in and rejoin us. Quick technical note. Karen, is your internet still stable?
So far, so good.
Okay, I'm going to make you a co-host for this meeting so that if anything happens such that I drop off, the meeting won't go away and everyone will be able to stay on.
It's not as windy now either.
Yeah, it seems to be settling down, but nonetheless, I just got a quick tutorial from Michelle before we started, and I'm gonna make you a co-host. So that means as long as one of us is on, the meeting will stay intact. which I just did. Okay. While we're waiting for Peter to come back, I think that's going to be an ongoing question. Peter raised a very good point, and it's actually a specific item in our charge that we are supposed to demonstrate congruity with the plan of conservation and development. So, Harold, I'll invite you as we go through this to highlight any areas that you would potentially see as incongruous with the direction that the Planning Commission is taking.
All right. I will do that. The reason I stepped away is that I was trying to print out the document, and I'm not able to do that. So I'll be standing at a different computer for some of this meeting.
Okay. So why don't we take a pass through the executive summary? And it's difficult to workshop on a meeting like this, but why don't we make one pass, and I'll just go to each person on the call and ask for comments on any part of the executive summary. And then after that, we'll just open it up for some more general discussion. Two quick notes before we do that. I did keep my promise to not send out another version before today, but I noticed that I had misused multi-use, which should have been mixed use. So I've corrected that in all instances in this document. So any place I refer to multiple use is now been corrected to mixed use. So with that, Karen, would you like to start?
Sure. So you just want us to start with one particular area we'd like to discuss, and then everybody can sort of take a turn. Is that?
I would say why don't you do any general comments on the executive summary, and then we can go and we'll just do one turn. So for anyone can comment on the executive summary as I call on you, and then we'll open it up for more of a general discussion.
Okay, so one of the things that jumped out at me right away is that first off, kudos to you. This is a lot of work and it's really well put together. I was wondering why we didn't choose Lyme as a selected case study for this project. And the reason why I say Lyme is because they're very similar to us. I mean, we share a school system, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the things I wanted to discuss. And what else are my hot topics? Oh, I know. Do you think there'll still be state sanctions? I mean, I feel like the appetite has sort of changed a little bit towards 830G, and before Malloy was very clear about there was going to be an impactful to the towns that didn't attempt to meet the guide. The magic number. And I'm wondering if we still think that's the case or if that sort of has dissipated a bit. So those are two where I'm going to start.
Okay. I'll go around it and then I'll respond to that, Karen. Okay, thanks. Who do I have? John Coughlin?
I'll take you off mute, and that'll help. Couple of things that, or not a couple of things, but one of the things that sort of was just, I was thinking maybe should be underlying in this, should be, that we're looking for sustainable housing, for the town, where it's for affordable, where if you, let's say the Diebolt project, in 20 years, that goes back. So we're back in 20 years, you're back at the same problem. Where if we do, let's say McCulloch or a homegrown thing, it's going to it'll be there for a long time. But then I also was curious about the HUD changes. I don't know if we're doing down there, but there's that affordable housing thing is no longer. It left in July rather. So that was something I noticed. And then there was a couple of little things, but I'll jump in later, I think.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Harold?
A couple things, and most of my comments have to deal with sewers and the town's policy for sewer avoidance. Now, in the POCD, we talk about a number of things. First of all, a lot of the sewers that are being put into the beach areas are being done so with funds from the Clean Water Act. And so part of the documentation that goes along with this states that only pre-existing lots with accepted building plans that are already identified can be added to the sewer project. Clean water funds do not allow economic development such as increasing density of use and adding new homes to previously non-buildable lots. All right, so what the whole thing that came out of the WPCA talked about, and I'll go on further for the sewer avoidance. The WPCA's intent to identify areas of special concern and to develop specific solutions to problems in the areas. And the objective of the town of Old Lyme is to avoid the need for public sewers. To protect Old Lyme groundwater and maintain rural character, multiple sewers should only be used for pollution abatement and not for increased uses that could not be serviced by an on-site sewage disposal system. The installation of sewers within the beach communities along Hartford Avenue is not intended to increase future economic development. Only pre-existing lots with accepted building plans that are already identified can be added to the sewer project. And then again, we state, clean water funds do not allow for economic development such as increasing density of use or adding new homes to previously non-buildable lots. So the Diebold project is kind of in conflict with that. Not so kind of, it is in conflict with that because he's looking to put high density and put sewers in. And the whole criteria that was established way back when is they couldn't have sewers supporting a building or building lot that could not be addressed by an underground sewage disposal system, subsurface sewage disposal system. So, you know, I think that's going to be a real hurdle. Now, they talk about, but, you know, and let me back up a little bit. I get carried away here. I think the executive summary is really well laid out. And again, you've done a terrific job. But I think as far as what I'm looking at from the POCD, when we talk about affordable housing, it should be consistent with the POCD. And I think it was Tom that made the comment earlier that like the Diebold project in 20 years, we're back to where we haven't really gained anything.
Don't forget, it's 40 years though, it's not 20.
Yeah, it's 40 years, but they're right. But I mean, at some point we're back to where we started. And so if we have something else, like the 2 units that we're talking about down at Macaulay Farm, you know, that's going to be there forever. And some of these others are not. And I think the reason Diebold really likes that section in Old Lyme is because, very frankly, he's looking at the median income of the town. And so that's helping him establish his 80% and 60%. There are other states like New Jersey that are much more rigorous in terms of affordable housing. But we have not been able up to this time, you know, all the developments have been, you know, large single family homes. And so we haven't had that ability to come up like, it's not multifamilies where you could put in some affordable housing. And so do we need to think about making some changes on our regulations that will allow, you know, multifamily homes or promote multifamily homes more than what we already have? And the third thing is, quite frankly, we're running out of room. I mean, as far as buildable land, so that's a challenge also.
Thanks, Harold. Actually, before this call, I had started a list of under the title of key limitations, and number 1 I had on that list was land availability, and I wanted to raise that question. The second one was the regulations, and you've raised that as well. And the third one was infrastructure, specifically sewers. And so you actually you've hit on all three of those in your commentary. But maybe we'll come back around on this. Maybe one of the sections that we need to put up front here is just a discussion of practical limitations, the specific limitations on use of the sewers that are being put in the beach communities because of the Clean Water Act restrictions, and the land availability. I think we might have to punt a little bit on the land availability because I'm not sure that for our report, but there'll be a commission that follows it, and we may want to come up with some kind of recommendation that suggests that the commission undertake a full build-out analysis with the help of the River Cog, which has software to help with that. But in any case, that was too much detail. But let me wrap around. I'm making a note to myself that there may need to be just another bullet under the executive summary that just talks about the practical limitations that we'll be up against and incorporate the 3 points you just raised.
Just one thought. I think it would be something else to consider is that if there are large tracts of land, if people would be able to sell at a reasonable price or donate land to the affordable housing effort, that they should be able to get some kind of tax credit from the town or some kind of, some benefit from it, something that creates an incentive. And so like McCulloch Farm, we could probably get, a couple acres here and a couple acres there, or even an acre here or there. And that would help us develop more affordable housing. Good.
And I did notice under in the town regulations under Chapter 4, I think there is a stub in there where apparently the first division of a subdivision, if it is allocated for affordable housing, does not have to comply with some regulations. So there's some waivers in there, but I think that's a great idea that could be extended to not just waivers but real incentives.
That's very correct. And a matter of fact, when you look through the documents, and John brought this up in his review of A30G. Not all zoning or not all commissions are being approached. When the developer comes in for the affordable housing, he bypasses. Even the last time when we had looked at affordable housing, planning got a referral. We didn't get a chance to look at it. Would we like affordable housing? Or yes or no? And that was basically it. And they also allow the developer to bypass certain zoning regulations. So,
Harold, do you have a sense of how to get at this? Short of a full build-out analysis, is there anything that we can do within our relatively short timeline to just get a rough handle on what land availability looks like?
Let me work on that.
I don't think it needs to be highly precise because no matter what, we're probably going to want to forward a recommendation to our successor that they go after, they do a more rigorous analysis. But at least if we can put some semi-quantitative notion in our report, that might help tell the story for the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, I will look at that. But it's something else that just that goes along with that. When we talk about just to show how much or where our town money comes from, only 4.7% of town's revenue comes from commercial. Everything else is residential. So it's the residential is just a huge part of our tax base. But let me look and try to figure out, what we have and where we have it. So I'll work on that.
At least on a ballpark level. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Tom?
So I agree. The first question I had originally was what Karen already brought up about the sanctions, and I think you're referring to Department of Transportation sanctions or education funding sanctions or something.
Yeah, that was back in January that those were brought up. That's one of them. Um, the other, there's some legislative activity out there, not necessarily sanctions, but it would go to more state control over zoning, and a lot of that was pushed off because of the pandemic. But it was left as we'll see what happens in the next legislative session. But yes, I don't want to cut you off. But that's roughly where I was coming from. So,
Okay, all right. And next question I have is under number 4, directly below that. It talks about impacting the education system. So, how are we tying the impact of affordable housing on the education system? How are we tying that back to it, or how are you tying it back to it?
so you're talking about the demographic trend statement there.
Yeah.
It was less about impacting the educational system directly, other than uh, general population loss and the potential loss of revenue for sustained investment in the educational system, which is part of the attraction and the quality of life in town. That was the notion, not on the not on the educational system, any particular aspect of the educational system, other than our ability to continue to invest in it with a reduced population.
Oh, because there's not as many students, you don't want to put as much. They wouldn't want to put as much money into it, just fewer students. You mean?
Right, fewer students and potentially fewer people, slower growth.
Okay. Um,
If that could be made more clear, I'm wide open to suggestions on that, Tom.
yeah, that's what I wasn't sure about. I thought it was tying. I was trying to figure out how it tied back to it. I mean, I know all the Board of Eds are all begging to try to increase their student population, um, as opposed to have it reduce. They're trying to keep the schools viable
Right.
because adding students doesn't exponentially increase the budget, and decreasing students doesn't exponentially decrease it. It's not a 1-for-1 sort of thing. So, okay. Small little thing before I forget it is in paragraph C, second last line, you repeat the word "the" twice. Not a big deal. Just in case you missed it.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. It just jumped out at me.
What line is it in? Let me get it. I got the thing open. So what line is it in, Tom?
So paragraph C,
Yep.
line 1, 2, 3, 4, line 6. In addition to failing to meet the
Got it. Done. Thank you.
I converted it to Word, and so it didn't convert 100% correct. Because at one point I had old Lynn, which it just made a mistake with the N and made it M. But besides that, let's see. Yeah, I think you addressed a lot of the other issues or the questions I had regarding about, getting a seat at the table, which a few other people have also mentioned. About having a seat at the table so that when proposals do come up, that we actually are part of it, or affordable housing would be part of the discussion. And besides that, that's pretty much where I was at. I have comments about what some other people had said already, but I'll hold that until everybody else gets a turn to go around.
Thanks, Tom. Just taking a note here. And you had mentioned a seat at the table as projects with affordable housing come up. I think that's something we're going to want to include in the recommendations for the commission. Okay. Who have I missed? John Zaccaro. Happy birthday, John.
Oh yeah, happy birthday, John.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. But thank you. I think I notified you the last time, and I expected a pizza to be delivered to my house, but that's,
Are you expecting that today?
so, first of all, this is an excellent outline and executive summary. The key is in the editing and redrafting as we do. But maybe I misread the emails, or I missed something, but I focused more on the outline than the executive summary. However, in paragraph B, I was a little concerned with the language, the last two lines in paragraph B, that to defend denial of applications for housing developments composed of at least 30% qualified affordable housing upon appeal. That, while technically true, that's too narrow. I think the statute basically kicks in for applications that are both set aside, which is what you're referring to, and government assisted, based on the definitions in the statute. So we might want to be less specific in that section. But other than, and obviously I focused on that one because that's the one that's related to the one I was working on. And then the only other thing I would say is when we get down to, I guess populating the other elements of the outline into a report, the piece that I sent over to you was primarily an outline form, and I was wondering if perhaps I should convert it to a narrative rather than outline, or at least begin that process, because it's, I use outline form just to keep my thoughts together and be able to move things around if necessary, but it lends itself to being converted to a narrative, if that's what you want. And then there are several sections, for example, in the findings, for example, where A, 1, and 2 could be, taken from the materials that I sent, if we get to that point at some point in the future. That's all I really have for this.
Good, John. First, thank you. I was counting on you to vet that language in paragraph C, and I'm glad you did. I'm sorry, in
B.
In B.
Yeah.
And if you were able to, you could send me your thoughts on how to better word that. I would be happy to just bolt that in.
Absolutely. I have to type it. I haven't typed it yet. So.
Exactly. So you can email that to me the next okay. I'll bolt it in. And also regarding the analysis of 830, I was thinking about that. Instead of having to disassemble it and put it into some draft form there, I could see that being an appendix.
Okay.
So, Michael, yeah. It's getting difficult to hear you. I'm getting a lot of feedback with all the lines all unmuted.
Tell you what, I'm going to mute everybody and then unmute John for a sec, and then see if that cleans it up. Okay, I have muted everybody, and you're able to unmute yourself. So John, I think it would be fine to essentially bolt in your analysis as an appendix, and just leave a placeholder in the outline. So in the next draft, I'll do the outline to put a reference out to the analysis that you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Either I'm the problem, or because I'm the only one unmuted, or you might be having some bandwidth issues at your location, Michael. I don't know. But I caught most of what you said, and I see it as a future task as you. But I'll send you that language for paragraph B that I talked about.
Great, and thank you. I was intention of that, and you did. Okay, let's move on then. If you're good, John, for now. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Michael. Great job in doing this. My comment was originally under findings, so I was going to hold off on the executive summary. But in retrospect and based on the discussion, I do think that in the executive summary, then there needs to be something related to barriers. So I was thinking under C, like current status of affordable housing in Old Lyme, under findings, I was feeling a lack of, why are we feeling what is hindering affordable housing in Old Lyme? And so I was thinking of things like that might be the place where the sewers go, or the buildable land, or the no public transportation connection to Old Saybrook or New London kind of thing. So I was thinking that maybe it would be better off, as you might have already stated earlier, that something like that should be upfront in the executive summary about what do we think as a committee, or what have we seen are the barriers to having more affordable housing in Old Lyme. State that right up front rather than put it down in the findings, or maybe both. That was my only comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I agree. As I was reading this over the weekend and reading some of our other notes, I came to the same place where I think it's worth a section on limitations or barriers, as you said, right up front in the executive summary.
Yeah. Oh, now I just remembered I did have another comment. Sorry. Based on the discussion about the POC, about the plan of conservation and development, maybe also that I would like to see, maybe we could discuss this at another time, but I would like to see really greater connectivity going forward with the new commission across, all the multiple commissions and boards that one would need to deal with to get their ducks in a row, similar to what our discussion was with the POC. So I'm just thinking maybe something about maybe that is a role of the future commission, connecting the dots. I think you have it stated there as being the lead for it and accountable, but I think pointing out to the Board of Selectmen that there are so many touch points for this type of a committee that it might be better just to call that out more clearly. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. And yeah, back on when I joined the Board of Selectmen, I think it was on October 5th, to go through our interim recommendations and the progress update. That came up specifically as not just a role for the commission, but part of the rationale for why we need one. So my take right now is that'll be woven right into the mission for the commission, should that as that comes to fruition, I hope.
Yeah. Thanks.
So it's been right up front in the discussion. So I'm pretty confident about that, but let's keep an eye on that as it evolves too.
Okay.
Because we have the Planning Commission, the Zoning Commission, Open Space, Economic Development, the Land Use Department. There's a fair number of town boards, commissions, and departments that touch on this. And as you know, the Sustainable Old Lyme came up as another one, and the general disclaimer, and those are the ones we know about. Okay, did I miss anybody on the first pass? Peter, you had started. Did you finish with your comments? Is Peter still there? Oh, I think we lost Peter, I think. Okay. history teaches he'll be back online, and I'll ask him again. But why don't I just like open it up now that everyone has heard the comments from everyone else. I don't have everything. So just a couple of things to summarize before we start. So we're going to put a section in on the barriers and limitations. The plan of conservation development came up. Karen, you had asked about Lyme. Let's revisit that, and as did Tom. The sanctions, are they real? I'll comment on that briefly right now. So the origin of that is just based on the reading from the legislature, the governor, and some of the caucuses within the legislature. So there are no specific sanctions out there that have been proposed and they're moving through the legislature, but there has been discussion of it. So I think it's something we keep an eye on. And maybe the language in the executive summary needs to be softened. As we go through this, we're going to have to pick our verbs and our adjectives to reflect the amount of hardness to our assertion or our recommendation. But in this case, maybe we want to soften that sanction when we can talk about that. Sustainability came up, and those limitations from Harold. And see, just reading through my notes here. I think that pretty much covers it. So I'll go back around. And why don't I just open it up and try to gate yourselves and just jump in. Any other additions or questions you want to make to this?
I can comment a little bit about land availability in the respect that what we found, at least at Hope when we were involved with it, was that land isn't the people. As soon as they heard that land was going to be used for affordable housing or purchased, the price of the land went through the roof. The cost went through the roof. It's like people automatically immediately thought, oh, it's worth a lot of money, and prices went up. So that's going to be a tricky path to try to navigate. And, there is limiting factors with sewers in town and amount of land, but in some cases, those factors were put there for a reason. And it is to limit. That's what Old Lyme has done, is they put in these factors to try to limit the amount of development. If there's no sewers, and you can only have so much density. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But since I've lived here for 28 years, it seems like it's always been the case. But there is land available, and you just have to find land that somebody else doesn't find as palatable, but that works for affordable housing, which typically has been land that's along I-95 or something like that. It just somebody else might not necessarily want.
Tom, did you see anything as you were surveying other towns on the shoreline of the valley and in the region? Had you seen any regulatory approaches or incentives or anything that any of the other towns had done to address that?
Well, yeah, Old Saybrook has the IHC.
Right.
They incentivized it, and Carl Fortuna, their select person, said they were trying to keep big box store from like a Home Depot coming into Old Saybrook and for years, and so they were incentivizing housing to go where the Post and Main went in, which is the 180 something units, and then Madison had incentives in certain parts of town or certain areas where they were encouraging it.
So maybe that's something we should highlight in our findings, how that's being engaged. I was thinking about what case studies to include in the findings. And I don't want to go too deep in the findings, but Old Saybrook was one of the ones that came up as you were describing it, as a highlight. Madison was another. And then to your question, and to Karen's question about Lyme, that may be where we do a little case study about how Lyme is approaching the change in their thinking towards rental from ownership, and incorporate some of that. but Old Saybrook and Madison in particular had jumped out at me as you were discussing the
Yeah, and we're finding that home-owned housing is just harder to implement and push out.
Yep.
And the rental income, the rental properties are the ones that you can have greater churn and keep as affordable. I understand, I always wanted to own a home, but I guess a lot of people just don't want to own a home. And that seems to be the trend where everybody's going is toward rentals, not home ownership. Liberty Way, which is in East Lyme, and the condos you see off to the left when you come down the route, the exit 72 connector, you see those off on the left. There's affordable housing in those units, and those are home ownership.
let's hold that thought. As we probably won't get to it tonight, but in our next section, I think we're going to want to go through the actual findings and what case studies we're going to prevent to support all these recommendations and directions we're trying to set. So I'll take a note on that and we'll revisit it. And I think that's where Lyme can come back into a little bit more sharp focus as well. Okay. Anything else on the exec summary? I'm looking at the time. It's moving along. It's already 20 after 6. I want to at least take a run through the initial recommendations. But before we wrap on the executive summary, anything else? Not wrap, but pause for the next discussion. Okay, hearing none right now. Again, please send me your notes on this, and I've got some, and I'll incorporate that into the next draft that we'll take up at our next meeting. Okay, and then we'll move on to the recommendations, which are start on page 6, of which the first two are a done deal. Okay, we still don't have, Peter did not come back. So Karen, back to you.
I don't think I have anything to add right at this second, Michael.
Okay. Let's see, who else have, John Coughlin. Thanks, Karen. John, I see you're on mute. I can try unmuting you from this end. Oh, there you are.
Great. After all that, I have nothing to add at this point.
Very good. Thank you. Harold? Harold, you're still muted from my end. I'll try and, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
All right. No, I have nothing to add at this point. This looks good.
Good. Harold, I have a bunch of stuff in brackets at the bottom. And one of them, I think I saw it was, might have been Salisbury. My head's spinning a little bit with all of the reports I've been reading. But I saw that one of the towns out there is actually proposed, or I'm not sure if they did it or they recommended it, but recommended reserving sewer capacity for affordable housing. Now, I know that goes directly in opposition with what you said about the Clean Water Act restrictions, but
yeah, I saw that too. I thought about bringing that up, but I figured we'll let that go. But anyway, now that you brought it up, like for instance, anything coming out of Old Lyme goes through, eventually goes through East Lyme and goes to New London. And so right now, the negotiations based on the WPCA, Water Control Pollution Authority, is through negotiations that said, this is all we can send. And so, the plant in New London has a certain amount of capacity. And so, anything beyond what has been agreed to is not going to be accepted. So there's a whole lot of, it's not just us. And there's actually, this is really kind of a compounded issue because, we're concerned about the aquifers and lime and O-lime in our areas. And it's not, with all the ledge and stuff that we have, the aquifers aren't really, all that ledge is preventing just normal distribution. It's not even across the town. And I know that there's a house near the shoreline. This guy went down over 700 feet to make sure he had enough water. And so, the Connecticut water company they've got wells on Cross Lane. And so, in the summertime, the fire pond behind the fire department is going down just because of water supply. So anyway, there's two issues. One is we can only pump out so much effluent based on our agreements and based on the capacity of the treatment plant in New London. And the other concern is that we're taking all this water out of our aquifers and sending it away. So there are the two different, they're hand in hand, but there are both, one, we can't pump more effluent than the plant can handle, but the second is that we're taking our aquifer water and sending it elsewhere.
Right.
So that's another conundrum. I think that's, as far as limiting the amount of affordable housing or the amount of cluster housing that we start to develop, those are going to be issues. Now, as far as the Diebold property, I think what he was trying to do is not only send all their discharge to New London, but he's also trying to get water from East Lyme. And with all the development going on in East Lyme, at some point, there's a breaking point. There's a limit. And so there's a lot of technical things that have to be evaluated and before a lot of this stuff gets done.
Okay. I guess what I'm hearing is that I'll leave that just as a placeholder in our potential recommendations, but it doesn't sound like we have the ability we don't have the control to even contemplate reserving capacity because we have a quote. I don't know if we have the ability to parcel out the quota we get, but so I'll just leave that as on kind of the bottom of the list and we can revisit it then.
Terrific. All right. Thanks.
Okay. And I have one other question for you, which is one of the things that I saw popping up in other towns is this notion of conversion of existing market rate properties to affordable, which seems like a good idea because it's very efficient. It doesn't require any more land. It's 100. It's 1 for 1. It doesn't increase the number of base units in the town. It actually reduces it and then converts to affordable housing. Is it feasible that there's even a path for that based on your knowledge of the regulations in Old Lyme?
Well, this is from a practical standpoint. If let's say we go out and we buy a house that's been foreclosed on, and we put some money into it and make it good. Typically, the amount of rent that you can charge someone is 1/100th of the purchase price. So in other words, if we get a house for $200,000, typically you charge about $2,000 a month for rent. So if we get subsidies, we can take that $2,000 and knock it down by 80%, by 20% or by 40%, and that might be possible. But like in the town of Old Lyme, where do you find a house that's worth $200,000?
Right.
Because most of the houses right now are probably between $300,000 and $400,000, and so that does not, using that rule of thumb, that really doesn't make that a viable option because we'll never get down there.
From a practical standpoint. So, but if philanthropy might be involved, but is there a regulatory path for that, or Is that feasible?
That's a good question. I don't know that there is. Because I think the way, when I look through the statutes and I look in chapter 126A and all that stuff, it talks about developing units. I've talked to people who live in associations with affordable housing. They would have, most people would have 2 and 3 bedroom condominiums with a lot more floor space than the affordable housing. In affordable housing, the bedrooms might be 2 bedrooms, but they're smaller. The living room's smaller. The space is smaller. So they're looking at keeping the cost of those units at a certain point, and then that rule of thumb kind of comes in. So you're looking at building houses that are going to be, or building units that are going to cost, hopefully between $150,000 and $200,000. And then that way it becomes much more viable as affordable housing.
Understood. Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Harold? Okay. Thank you.
Oh.
John Zaccaro?
Okay. So we're looking at the recommendations, right?
Right.
This is sort of something, it's like a thread that's been being tugged at for a couple of meetings now. I think that it's important for us to express clearly why a moratorium, obtaining a moratorium would lead to the ability to increase affordable housing opportunities in Old Lyme, because on its face, it sounds like we just want to get around the limitations on denying applications. But really, the limitations on denying applications are, they lead to a loss of control that the town would find unpalatable. And I just think that we have to express that somehow, because maybe this is just a political concern and it's a little bit unformed, but I highlighted that letter C, and I'd like to see in the report sort of a policy statement on why obtaining a moratorium when we can't meet the basic 10% limit would be beneficial to promoting affordable housing. That might be a larger discussion, but this is going to be cast in stone once we finish it and submit it. So that's the only comment that I have about it. I'm not. By the way, I'm not suggesting a moratorium isn't important. I've been a proponent of us obtaining a moratorium from the very beginning. So I think it's something we can do and we should do. But
I think somewhere in my pile of stuff, I have a list of towns that have qualified for a moratorium over the years. And I know at least a couple of the towns that have done it, I've done some reading on why they did it. And there are at least some that explicitly expressed the desire to get a moratorium, to give them breathing room so that they could expand affordable housing in a way that was consistent with their strategy, and rather than wait for proposals that they did not solicit come in. There have been others that I think were more just trying to get the state to back off, or get in a position where the state would back off. But I've seen at least a couple of examples, if I'm remembering correctly, Ridgefield might be one of them, where the moratorium was seen as a strategic move to help them develop affordable housing in a manner that was consistent with their overall development strategy, which might be something that we can pick up on if it's, and Harold, I think we'd go back to the planning commission and see if that meshed with the plan of conservation and development. But I think you raised a great point, John, and I agree. Let's try and put the why in there, not just the what. So anything else, John?
No, I'm all set. Thanks.
Jen.
I think I'm good. I agree with John. I had a concern just about that sticking out like as an excuse or something. So I'd be quite happy if we address the moratorium issue as well. Maybe it's just a plan B. So it should never be a plan A, but maybe it's a we need to figure out somehow how to manage that message, because that's not the message that we are all striving for. Obviously, is that we're trying to get around something. It just needs to be a tool that maybe we could use to retain the character that everybody's been talking about, for Old Lyme, and the fact that we are sort of a bedroom community for other working type towns. Just having limited commercial commercial properties in our area. So anyhow, I think those are my only comment. I had a question about senior housing, but I think I'll hold it. I just think it goes towards, like, I'm thinking of the HEPA apartments in East Lyme, and that they sold out pretty much straight away. There's actually at one time, I don't know if it's still the case, that there was a waiting list for getting into those apartments. And that's a different type of housing for seniors, definitely low income, and affordable for sure. But seeing something like that, where an organization might come in and plan a community like that, certainly would raise some issues with everything we've talked about with sewer availability and land availability and things like that. But I think overall, I just want to make sure that we don't characterize our report, or even a section of our report, as, well, we can't possibly do that because of X or Y, so that it comes off as the message is we're trying to make excuses, but rather make it a very proactive, positive message, which I think it is right now.
Good. And to your earlier point, be transparent about what the barriers are, but seek solutions. Okay. Tom, yep, Tom.
No, I'm all set. I mostly had comments on the executive summary.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for taking the extra time to go through this. I think I got a fair stack of notes here to take another run at this. So I'm thinking I'll do that. Please, again, forward me your thoughts, and in case I missed writing it down, or what happens more frequently is that I can't read my own notes, and then I'll incorporate those into the next draft. I'm thinking for our next meeting, which will be November 16th, we'll try and do, assuming it's going to be another virtual meeting, we'll try and do kind of a workshop on getting the findings put together and getting these recommendations at least sorted into those that we're definitely going to advance and those that need some more work. And we had one other item for discussion tonight, which is on what are we missing in terms of information. And I had a couple of notes on that, and some of which we've addressed. One is Harold had mentioned he's going to have a look at land availability, just to have some. I don't think we're going to be able to do a full-fledged capacity analysis in the time that we have or the resources we have, but at least some kind of ballpark representation of what the capacity in town is. And then we'll send that off to the commission to flesh it out. We had talked about this this is regarding the moratorium. To have any discussion of the moratorium, we're going to need to have our 1990 baseline data. Is it 1990, John? That the increase in affordable housing is based on to qualify for a moratorium and the points? Yeah, John's Carl. You're muted.
Yeah, yeah, sorry about that. So that's a good question, but let me just get my, where is it? I think that moratorium, hold on. Yeah, so period, yeah, the applicable period since July 1st, 1990.
Okay.
But there was something in the amendments, and you see that I have a highlight in there about reviewing the 2017 amendments. So there's something that changes that. And also there's going to be a new census, the number of points goes back up to 75 in one of the instances after the 2022 census. I'm sorry. Okay, so July 1st, 1990 is the current period that we're measuring from.
Okay, so that's knowable.
Right, it's knowable, but it will be a significant task to gather that information, because if you look at all the categories in order that qualify for housing unit equivalent points, that's that's quite a job of collating the housing stock for 30 years.
So the Department of Housing wouldn't have that?
Who would have that? I'm sorry?
Department of Housing, collecting data annually to annual appeals list. I was hoping maybe that it would just be a matter of them, a request, and not something we'd have to synthesize.
Yeah, I hope they do. Fingers crossed.
Let's hope I try that first.
Michael, do you want me to ask Lori for that at HUD?
That'd be great, Jen, if you have an open channel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see if I could get it.
Okay, I want to let us go. I have one more item on kind of the open items around information collection. And that's that whole notion of public perception. And we've got a fair amount of anecdotal stuff out there from social media, the interaction with previous projects. But my thought on this is that we don't have enough time or enough budget to do a really well-designed opinion survey like the Economic Development Commission did in preparing their report and their findings. So I'm thinking that I don't see any real barrier it would create if we didn't have a rigorous section on public perception. And so basically I'm proposing that we forward that to our successors as something to be done with some more time and additional resources to do it in a rigorous scientific way, so that anything that comes up in the form of public opinion, can actually be used as the basis to form recommendations and make decisions. Any thoughts on that from the group?
I agree. No, I think we should pass that on, because it's going to take some money, it's going to take some time, and you have to have a survey that's we really have to think that out, and has to be, I guess, a really true survey. So I don't think we've got time to do that, and it's a fairly involved process. So I agree with you. We should pass that on to the new commission.
Actually, I have that. I think I have that in there. I do. I've got that in the recommendations under D. Increase public outreach and education. Start with a professionally designed, scientifically rigorous public opinion survey. So I will not propose that we expend any more effort during our tenure to dig into that. So unless anyone has a different thought, I'll capture that.
Michael, this is Jen. Just a not a comment on that, but the solution of that being a well-designed, engineered, professional survey as a means to get into public perception, may or may not be needed. I'm not really sure that we know we need to build. I think we fundamentally know we need to build awareness of what affordable housing is and looks like and the need for it, but I'm not really sure that a survey that we pay somebody to do would necessarily tell us anything more. So it would need to be very specific, I would think, as to what you're trying to get at that we don't already know, perhaps. That's just my thought on the survey for this topic, anyways, in Old Lyme.
Thanks, Jen. I think that's a good point. So maybe what I'll do then is I'll sort of downgrade the language in that recommendation to consider. Instead of do it. Okay. Any other suggestions on gaps we need to fill in order to keep moving forward on this report from the group? Okay. Hearing none, I will thank you again for taking extra time to do this special meeting. And I'll give this a turn. If you send me in your notes, we'll take another lap. And if you have any ideas on how to bring this together at our next meeting, given the challenges of being virtual, I'm wide open to suggestions on that. So with that, thanks again, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Motion by John to adjourn. Second?
I'll second it.
Harold seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will unmute everyone, and instead of polling, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
And Tom?
Oh, aye.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a great
Thanks,
night.
Michael.
Thanks, guys.